Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blockchain Versus. This is Christina Bruhan, and I am joined by my co-host, Jeremy Bourne. And we are here today with a very special guest, Mr. Daniel Gouldman from Ternio. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Well, thanks so much for being on. We're very excited to dig into Ternio and your product Blockcard, to hear a bit about the organization and just kind of how you got here. But if you don't mind, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got into blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, it's for us, I'll go for me. So for a long time, 20 plus years, I ran large companies as a upper level management, right? Working in corporate, basically. And I was able to, luckily enough for myself, get into a position where I could go and run my own companies. I had a few businesses that I had started over the years, and one of them was specifically in ad technology, right? So helping publishers monetize income with through various means. And right around, it was in middle of 2017, there was a resurgence, a lot of fascination around cryptocurrency. We were looking at particular use cases for ad technology. And then there was some evolution that happened with different kinds of blockchains away from proof of work into more of a proof of stake, like Stellar, like Hyperledger Fabric. And so we started to identify some really great use cases, specifically around scalability and particularly in the digital advertising space that requires millions of transactions per second. And that's what got us into, or at least me and my team, into blockchain. We were trying to solve for a specific use case. Over that timeline, we've been, officially, Ternio's been around for over 2 years now. Where we started to make all our traction was on the fintech side, because one page in our white paper was on the block card, because it was focused around the problem of people have digital assets that can solve a lot of problems, but it doesn't do you any practical, there's no practical good to it if when you go to Walmart, you can't use it, right? Or, Kroger or something. So we solved that problem through the block card, which is frankly where we ended up getting, all of our traction. And here today, we're basically effectively for lack of a better term, a fintech platform, a global fintech platform on the blockchain.
That's amazing. Sorry if I knew with my mute button there. So Daniel, the blockchain itself is pretty impressive. I mean, Ternio touts that it can do up to 1 million transactions per second. And from a technology standpoint and scalability, that's a really big deal. Can you tell our viewers or listeners a bit more about that?
Yeah, and that's where we started. We started with, I had one of the guys that worked for me at the ad tech company that I had, Ad3. He said, I think we may, because of proof of stake, I think we may be able to solve the issue around scalability, because the blockchain, for all of its benefits, it's slow. And people constantly who get in the weeds, when they really understand it, they say, look, blockchain's got this, and this, these different benefits, but it'll never be practical as long as it's this slow. It'll never be practical. And so what we were trying to solve for, on the back of a napkin effectively was, scaling that. And in digital advertising, it's 10 million plus, 15 million plus transactions per second. It's crazy. And so we built Lexicon. We've run 500 million ad transactions through Lexicon. But the reality is, in terms of, let's say for that particular industry, 70% of all the money that's being spent by an advertiser in digital advertising, even though it's a digital product, there's no physical movement of any kind, is 70% of that money goes to gatekeepers like Google, Facebook, middlemen. And we thought, okay, great. Well, we're going to have the largest advertisers in the world they're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars. Incredible amount of money these guys are going to save. But the reality is there's a lot of incentives from the middlemen to prevent that kind of level of transparency, and to some extent, ad agencies who kind of control the funds for their clients. So where, it's kind of like hitting your head up against a wall, even though we've done some great tests and pilots. But the reality is, when it comes to blockchain and enterprise, a lot of companies, whether it's digital advertising or anywhere else, they're kind of in the proof of concept stage. They're like testing it here or some small test, but they're not actually going like full on. And if you don't do that, you don't really need a scalability solution. So I think what we've built was kind of like too early for its time, because everybody's focused around trying to drive 20 miles an hour, and we're like, okay, well, we got a Ferrari and it can drive, 300 miles an hour, and they just don't need that. They're still focused on how do I steer this thing,
Right. No, and that makes sense. And it's a very complex landscape, right? I mean, when you start getting into tokens and the mechanics behind, all of these different new options, these are new payment systems and new, that defy the old rules. People have a tough time wrapping their heads around that. So can you tell us a bit? I mean, I know you're kind of an expert in stable coins yourself, but that's really the mechanics behind why Visa would partner with something like this, right? Why it makes it stable, why the fluctuations within the market don't really matter at the point of sale. That's a very complex issue. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Well, yeah, and that's where it's true. So these are new payment systems. It's a new technology rail. I mean, most payment systems are stuck in 50-year-old systems, ACH, SWIFT, IBAN, wires. They're old payment systems, invoicing, and I think that most people fail to understand what cryptocurrency really is, right? It's an app on top of a blockchain rail, and that doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be Ethereum with smart contracts. It doesn't have to be that. I mean, we're starting to see across the world, central banks that are adopting creating a digital asset that is effectively no different than what they had before from a monetary policy perspective. But what makes it different, and this is really important because some people don't understand, in my opinion, they're like, what's the point of a stable token? Because it's still effectively run by the central government. It's like, well, that's never going to change. No, government's not going to give up their ability and their right and their power when it comes to monetary policy. What will happen with the stable token is you're effectively digitizing, the money. And so that means, number one, it can't be counterfeit, which is great. Number two, there's more transparency. That's really important in certain countries that have a lot of fraud. So you can start to identify, well, why is this police captain, this lieutenant, well, all of a sudden, how does he own a beach, or a beach house that's worth $1 million? He doesn't get paid that kind of money. So you can actually use it to track corruption, and you can, better use for tracking money laundering. Or we noticed that chain analysis identified a bunch of pedophiles and a pedophile ring that were using Bitcoin. So it's a really, I think, a much better tool in terms of transparency, but it's also going to help the people who need it the most. So if you're in cash, as a consumer, a resident, let's say you work in Mexico and you're dependent upon remittances. Well, most people right now are going to like a Western Union. They need a third-party intermediary. So the problem is, if I could send somebody, Bitcoin right now to someone in Mexico, but what are they going to do about it? What can they do with that functionally? So I can get it over cross-border, but now what? And for the moment, most people are stuck with some kind of PayPal app, which charges a lot of money, or it's slow, or same thing with Western Union, and it's not safe because you got to physically go and pick up the money at a bank or somewhere. I think the future is I'm going to be able to send you money in a stable form, U.S. dollars. It's going to automatically convert to whatever the currency it needs to be, pesos or whatever, and you'll instantly have access to a card on your phone. So I can send it to you for next to nothing. I can get it to you instantly, and I don't have to worry about. I can disintermediate those unnecessary middlemen that were previously had a monopoly and that were charging me. They're effectively stealing 2 or 3% of GDP from these countries, particularly in the Caribbean islands where they're really dependent on remittances because all they have surrounding them is an ocean. So I think that's a great use case that stable tokens are built for, and not even factoring in just flat out being a better system in the United States, or even a first world country, quote unquote. People, there's like $51 trillion in ACHs that went back and forth in the United States in 2018. 51 trillion, and that means people were paying billions and billions and billions of dollars in these bank fees that basically are going to evaporate.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see what this is going to do to the financial markets and the way in which we transact, send money across the world. I mean, it just removes, to your point, so many barriers, right?
Yep.
You see MoneyGram, Western Union, specifically MoneyGram, used to work with them. And I know in, what was it, 2015, 2016, they were, looking into different protocols and things that they could do with blockchain technology. Specifically, I know they were working with XRP to see if that could help their ecosystem. So as we see this evolving and we see more companies realizing that if they don't make a shift, that they're going to be behind the curve, and potentially it could lead to a Blockbuster video type of situation to where they didn't move quick enough and they had to shut down everything. What do you think companies that are in that space need to do and understand to be able to take advantage of this new digital economy and the way we can transfer money through the utilization of things like blockchain?
Well, Blockbuster Video is a great example. I actually worked there. I kind of cut my teeth as a kid at Blockbuster. I worked there for 10 years, and I saw it firsthand what was happening. And it's a great analogy because, and while that story is not as well known, people think it's just Netflix came in and took their lunch, and they don't really know all the details behind it. But the truth is that at the core, what you have is a company like a Western Union or a MoneyGram, and they have a brand that's very well known. So did Blockbuster. They were one of the top 10 brands in the world. Western Union is a huge brand. Everybody knows them. But what you do is you effectively are going to see, I think, this inflection point that's going to happen where the advantages, right? The advantages of the big brand, of the big multi-billion-dollar company that is number one in their marketplace, those advantages are going to become a noose around their neck. It's going to go from we have a strategic advantage to holy shit, we now have a strategic problem because now we have a lot of overhead. Now we can't compete on cost. We can't compete on speed. We can't compete on convenience. So you basically are going to get to a point where they're going to have, and they have that what is it, the entrepreneur's dilemma, or there's a name for it, but they're basically going to have a problem where they're going to have to figure out a way to soft land that plane where they're cutting into their own core business where they make a lot of money. And the other thing is they've made a lot of, those kinds of companies, they've made a lot of money off of sort of monopolizing a marketplace. So what blockchain is going to do is going to create new competition. So companies like myself, right, I'm a Ternio, with Blockcard, and it being a platform that we white label with other players around the world, we will be able to get into market much, much, much cheaper. So now we can create some competition for remittance. If we want to set up shop, and believe me, I'm talking to people right now about this, set up shop in, let's say, the Bahamas. Then you attack the Bahamas and you basically go after remittance business. It's a huge, 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 it's billions of dollars. And if you can save consumers, that 2% or 1% on all of the money that's basically being stolen from them from their island, it's great for the politicians, it's great for the people, it's great for everybody, except for the old company that was doing it the old way. So I'm not going to do them any favors by giving them any suggestions, although I will say we actually did have a suggestion for one company that was in that space that we thought kind of solved part of their problem and allowed for them to soft land the plane, and they weren't interested. They didn't get it. And that's great for me because it just says, it tells me, I see it all the time. We're literally telling people our strategy and how we're going to do it, and they don't get it. So it's like, good. Very, 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 very good for us.
Yep. No, absolutely. It's funny when you talk about the Blockbuster story, and like you said, a lot of people don't really understand, how that really happened. And just all of a sudden, they all just started shutting down. So what few know is a really interesting fact, right? So the former Blockbuster CEO, his name's John Antioco.
Yeah, Antioco.
Yeah. So in 2000, and Christine, I'm not sure if you know this either, but in 2000, basically the CEO was asked for $50 million to give away the company he founded, which is Netflix, right? So they had the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million. Now, fast forward to today, it's a $32.9 billion company, right? So these opportunities exist now, right? For people to, acquire smaller companies that solve a huge problem. So they need to really wake up because, to your point, the opportunities exist, but they're only going to exist for a very short amount of time. And as we know, anything about technology, looking back in the past, the evolution of technology and the speed in which things evolve and come to market are expanding rapidly. every single year with every, new technology that comes out, whether it be a cell phone or whether it be, the internet, whether it be these messaging apps or, in-home delivery. I mean, these things are just rapidly expanding and they're moving quickly. And if people don't understand the implications of these things very quickly, then they literally can go out of business with a moment's notice.
And I was in Dallas when I was literally in a big room, big room. It was like at a comedy club for some event for Blockbuster, like, not executives, but like mid-level management. I was still younger at that time. I'm 42 now. And I remember there's sort of this co-president and then an executive vice president, Mike Romer and Nigel Travis. And there were the two guys running the company, right? That ran underneath John Antioco. And they were laughing. They were on the stage and they were laughing. They were like, yep, Netflix came hat in hand and wanted us to buy them for $50 million. And we laughed. People don't remember. Blockbuster threw in like $200 million into Blockbuster.com. Like, people don't know really what happened. They misinterpret the history because it's an easy correlation to say the out with the old, in with the new. But Netflix basically, and if you hear from Netflix's side, so I could say Blockbuster was laughing about it. I was listening to them laugh, and then. Netflix, from their point of view, they were talking about how they admitted they went there hat in hand. They wanted to get bought. They had a lot of problems. I remember their stock price went to $1. They looked like they were going out of business. They were done. And they got in that car ride. As soon as they basically were rejected by Blockbuster, they got in the car and they felt like they were done. It was over for them. And, fast forward, Netflix, is part of FANG, which is commonly talked about in stock. And a lot of people don't even know that they started Roku. They were the starting investment into Roku, which is now this massive thing. So innovation will win with smart, management, with a little bit of luck, a lot of luck, a lot of hard work.
I absolutely agree. I think that the innovation is definitely the disrupting factor. And that actually kind of leads well into my next question. So, Daniel, I hope this isn't a sensitive issue for you. I mean, you're pretty public about it, but you and I share something in common. At one point, we both lived out of our cars. And I will tell you from my personal experience, it changes how you look at money and how you accumulate wealth. And I remember feeling like the system was broken and like some of us will never be able to level up. What can you tell our audience about that experience and how it kind of shaped you and your views about owning your financial freedom and building wealth with this new global economic engine?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really ever talked about it publicly. I mean, I put it on my LinkedIn, but I've never really told the story. But I'm not, I'm proud of what I've done. When I lived in a dysfunctional family, my parents were divorced, and I went to like 14 schools in 14 years. I had a lot of behavioral problems. My grandfather thought I was going to go to jail, and I would say that was the good one. That was the one that, I had a good relationship with. So, it was like living when I ran away. I was 17. I was a junior. I played basketball. I always hated authority. Honestly, I've always hated authority, and that showed in my early career when I was, a hard worker, and I moved up the ranks, but authority was not my thing. Okay, so running my own company is well suited for my personality from that perspective. But yeah, I literally left Dallas, and I got in my car that I owned, and then I drove cross country, and I was homeless in Irvine, which is a weird place to be homeless in. And so I lived in my car, and I got woken up by cops and parks and racquetball courts and you name it. And I found out there's not a anywhere in the entire city of Irvine that, if it had grass, there was water sprinklers, because I had like a gym membership. I paid $99 for 6 months, and every morning I'd go take a shower. And I remember I was actually working at Blockbuster Video when I got recruited. First I was working at McDonald's and Boston Market, and I was working my ass off, and I was going to high school to graduate. And then I got recruited to go work at Blockbuster. And I remember one day I had all my stuff in my car, like I had it neatly organized, my dirty clothes, my clean clothes. And I remember like the assistant manager was like, I opened up my trunk and we're closing. It was like 2:00 in the morning. Cause back in the day, Blockbuster was open till midnight, so you didn't get out till 2. And he was like, what, do you live out of your car? And I was laughing and was like, yeah. And then someone found out and I lived out of my car. And I was, I was making like $5.75 an hour, if I remember correctly. And they offered insurance at that time, and I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford it. So, because especially in California, everything is super important, like expensive. Even in Santa Ana, which was like the barrio, as a white boy for me, like me, that didn't speak Spanish, it was not safe, and I couldn't afford that. But my district manager,
that's my neighborhood.
okay, well, Santa Ana's probably changed a lot. There's a good part of Santa Ana, but that time,
Yeah,
Santa Ana's
we're
not so great.
Orange County. Yeah, but you're not wrong. I mean, Irvine is a very weird place to be homeless when you're surrounded by so much wealth. I totally know what you're talking about.
It is. And the district manager came in, Sula Rocca, and she said, I heard about what happened, and you really need insurance. And they gave me more money so I would have insurance. And I worked my ass off. I worked all the time. I put in everything. And I'll tell you that my message for people is, and I eventually, I'll tell you a little funny little thing. I don't know if I'm talking too much about this. I had a store manager named Robert Taylor, and he used to make a joke. He was really funny. He'd be like, when he was trying to make light of it, and he was like, hey, Daniel. He's like, hey, man, do you pay like auto insurance or home renters? And, it was really funny. But he helped me find a place. I rented a room from the parents of another employee, and I got my start kind of getting out of that situation and finding a roof over my head. And it was very important because over my career, I had amazing mentorship, which all I'd say is you need mentorship in your life. You need people who are going to be a good influence, who are going to help you all the way through. But also, you got to work hard. You got to work really, really hard, and you got to be willing to do the things other people aren't going to, be willing to do. And it doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter if you're working at McDonald's. You do it with excellence. You do it with total excellence. And eventually, it's like started from the bottom, now I'm here. And it can happen for anybody. You just have to put in the work.
Oh my gosh, Daniel, that's so amazing. And that is literally mine and Jeremy's song. Like, as this whole evolution of Coin Genius, that's always been our song. It's so funny you brought that up.
But it's true. But it's totally true. And so, so I'm proud of it because I didn't take help from anybody. I got through school. I went to college. I did some college, but I worked so hard and I constantly kept moving up the ranks. I became a store manager when I was 18. I ran 2 stores when I was 19. I worked in the corporate office for Blockbuster when I was 20. I became a district manager when I was 22. And I just kept going and going and going. I put in whatever amount of work I had to put in. I would work 24 hours in a row for no more money, just because I was committed to what I did. And I got to a point in my career where it was like, and then I was 23 years old and I was training other district managers who were sometimes twice my age. And I was the trainer. So what it came down to was I was willing to put in the work, and I was smart, but I was also hard to deal with, because the other thing I'll tell people is, and I had this great, I had a lot of great mentors. Very lucky that I had great mentors. People were willing to deal with my bullshit because I was not easy to I was not easy to manage. I had excellence, but I was also headstrong and stubborn. And I remember one of my bosses said, just because you're right a lot doesn't mean you're always right. So you get in this habit of thinking that you're cocky about the fact that you know what you're talking about, so you're right. Well, maybe you are right, and maybe you're not. And you have to learn how to. And I remember this guy Clay Kilby was a regional at Blockbuster. He said, you have to sometimes you have to salute the flag. It's like, it doesn't really matter. Decision's already made, and you just got to go with it. And that was good advice. So look, I mean, for anybody who wants to do well in their life, they have to work hard and they have to be willing to kind of to respect their authority that they work for, give honest input, but when decisions are made, to move on and just execute as best as you can. And it really made me who I am today, to be honest. All of the trials and tribulations of working for a company on the downslide, by the way, was very good, because it taught me how to deal with so many different challenges because the company itself was struggling. So the company was constantly making bad decisions, and you had to constantly execute some of the worst decisions, or maybe they just needed it for survival, and you're constantly having to operate in that environment. It was, it definitely taught me skill sets that I am very lucky to have.
Well, this is great. I mean, thank you so much for, letting us pry into your background and your story. I think it's really important, right? This is really important to share this with folks. There's so many aspiring entrepreneurs and people, especially in the blockchain crypto space. There's some incredibly talented people that are extremely intelligent, more intelligent than I'll ever be. And they try to start a project, they recruit some folks, and ultimately they go under because they have no idea how to run a business or how to market their products, which is really tragic, right? So we always try to find those people and really support them as much as we can. But I think you said something really important that, people need to take away from this conversation, and something that I thoroughly believe as well, which is if you're a leader in any organization, the only way to succeed in my eyes is to outwork everybody. And you show by example, you lead by example, because it's interesting how anything that you do as a leader filters down into the company. And it motivates people, not by what you say necessarily. So yeah, obviously it helps if you're, good at talking and, you have a solid vision, but it's really your work ethic and what you put on the line that shows people, what you're willing to do. And people want to follow people like that. People want to follow people that, just have a, undeniable passion for what they're doing. And to your point, they're willing to work 24 hours a day if needed to be able to get the job done. So that's kind of how I run the organization as much as I can, and just showing people, that, I'm fully committed. But it's interesting because a lot of leaders have very, different viewpoints in terms of leadership and what leadership is. I'm a firm believer that actions speak a heck of a lot louder than words. And, you've really proven that. So I'm assuming, this is what has led to the success of Ternio and everything that you're doing. And I'm sure you have an incredible team of people that are working together with you to make this thing happen. So really appreciate that and completely agree with your methodology there.
Thank you. And you talk about team, I'll tell you, building a high performance team is a really important thing. And you've got to have great people that work with you, and how you manage those people really matters, because obviously there's going to be sometimes you have to kind of draw the line and say, this is what we're doing, strategically, like this is the decision. But it's a constant balance between listening for feedback, paying, really close attention to understanding what's happening, and giving people the freedom to be able to execute. No one wants to be micromanaged. And if you have great people on your team, then you're going to have a balance. Not everyone on your team is going to be a home run hitter. So you're going to have some people who are going to not execute, and you're going to have to make decisions as to moving them out of the organization. Because as long as you're going to accept those people in the organization, your home run hitters are going to look at that and say, what's going on? It affects everybody. It affects the whole team. But if you're smart at hiring, and you bring on people who have that entrepreneurial spirit, who want to go and take the hill, who are really hard, they have a great work ethic and passion behind what they do, commitment to excellence, then everyone wins. And I'm very blessed, because I feel like we're lucky because we have a small team. It becomes much harder to manage when you get 100, 200, 1,000 employees. It becomes much more difficult to be able to have your thumb on the pulse in terms of who's doing what and who's really actually contributing and all of that. But I'm blessed that the core of our team is phenomenal. We have an amazing team.
That's great. Well, I'm going to transition slightly and really just get into the future, right? You've built this incredible team. You have this incredible concept. It makes a lot of sense. I'm a huge fan and believer in stablecoins, and that's ultimately how we're going to transact at point of sale and buy that, cup of coffee, proverbially. What do you see in the future? Like, what is the end goal for Ternio and everything that you guys are doing? And how close do you think you are to actually attaining that?
Yeah, I think the future is going to be basically not dissimilar from what you're seeing with the neobanks. So I was having a conversation with somebody from Visa, and it was a great conversation. It was like, okay, like he totally got it. Like I was so impressed with his clarity as to what's coming, complete clarity. And it's like, look, what the neobanks are doing is great, and it's an evolution from traditional banks, because most people don't understand how absolutely backwards like the banking technology is. It's just ridiculously backwards. But the neobanks will ultimately be built on top of our technology, meaning blockchain. And so we're just adding an additional layer that they don't have right now. Like they have ACH and Swift. That money is stuck in the banking system, which is a closed loop system. And all we're doing is basically providing an open loop system. So I can send you value and you can hold it. You don't need a third party custodian. You don't need a bank anymore. You can be your own bank. You have your own digital wallet. And when we get better at making those things easier to manage for consumers, there will always be the need for custody because some people don't want to mess with it. They're not technically inclined or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, what we're going to find is that it's like a fintech. It's the evolution of the fintechs. And the fintechs will continue to evolve into something where they'll be including blockchain. And like you said, stable tokens right now, and I don't think this will ever, I mean, it could change. Like effectively right now, you can't walk into McDonald's and give them USDT, or which I wouldn't want anyway because it's not one-to-one. But let's say there's something else like a USDC or a PAX, which is a stable token, right? And they're one-to-one backed by a physical dollar sitting in a bank. Well, eventually, though, there's going to be enough consumers. Like even if Walmart said, "Yeah, we get it. We're going to save a lot of money on costs, right? Because I got to pay Visa and Mastercard." The reality is, Walmart, biggest retailer in the world. How many people physically are walking around with any kind of cryptocurrency, even if they could transact it quickly, which Bitcoin cannot do? Bitcoin's like a savings account. Okay, so there, even if you open that capability up today, there's just not enough people for it to matter. It wouldn't even be a blip on their financials. It would mean nothing. It would mean almost nothing. Be no impact. So what you got to do is you got to increase the capabilities in terms of the sheer supply of number of people who have it, who are using it for the advantages that they have. Then you'll see more merchants that will basically start to take direct. And that it's effectively in the same way that we used to take cash. I mean, a lot of people obviously will take cash, but meaning that there's more and more transactions that are happening digitally because it's just more convenient, more effective. Well, now we'll just be doing digital cash. Okay, so what's cool about that now is, like, let's say if I pay Walmart today and I swipe my card, not only do I have, if I'm Walmart, I have to pay the Visa, MasterCard, and the payment processor and all these other guys, these middlemen, I have to pay them a fee, but also I don't get the money for like 3 days and sometimes a week. Whereas with digital cash, which is really what this is sort of open loop digital cash, then if there's confidence from Walmart or from McDonald's that all they have to do is redeem. So if they send that money, it'll go to their bank and the money is accepted. And I think that we will eventually get to that system where the money, the stable tokens are effectively accepted. And you will have a much faster transfer of value between the consumer to the merchant with fewer intermediaries, of which today there are presently many.
I would 100% agree with that. And then there's the interesting thing about, the global economic outlook right now. And you think about what's happening with things like the coronavirus. And, this could be short-lived. It could not be. I think it could be a lot more serious than people think. And not necessarily because a tremendous amount of people are going to fall ill to it and, die eventually. It has nothing to do with that. It's more about the economic impact to these large global economies. The interesting thing that I'm reading more and more is, you see in China, they're treating their paper money, right? Because they fear that that is the way in which this is being spread. And more governments are making these statements and making this more of an issue to say maybe that the best next step to prevent an outbreak, especially in this country, in a pandemic, is to limit the use of paper money. So I think that there's some very interesting things that are happening right now that could get us to that end goal of using only digital currencies very quickly. And you're going to start to see a lot of governments, as we've already seen with China, move towards a digital dollar or a digital yuan or whatever it is. So I think we can get there a lot quicker with things like this that are happening that, were not necessarily planned, but it is really interesting as it relates to a peer-to-peer payment system originally established by Satoshi Nakamoto and how this plays very well into how this is all unfolding.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like, I can't think of one advantage of having paper money versus digital money. The only thing is, it's the comfort level and getting people to understand it. But we're so ready. We're already mostly around the world, depending on what country you're in, because some countries are kind of more cash type, countries. But for the most part, people accept the idea around digital money, whether it be a card or whether it be when they look in there. I mean, when you're looking at your PayPal balance, you're not looking at money. You're looking at not ones and zeros. and you trust that if it says you have $100, that the money is going to be there, period, right? You're not looking at money. You're not looking at a physical image of the safe, sitting with your cash. You're looking at ones and zeros. And so I'm very confident that eventually people will start to understand there's tremendous advantages, and we're seeing that in countries all around the world. We're hearing it from central banks. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And and when it actually happens, it's going to be much better for the economy. There'll be fewer middlemen in finance. It's a good thing for consumers. It's a good thing for governments because it's more transparent. I just think it's a good thing all the way around.
I love it. Daniel, I have a quick question and we'll probably start wrapping up. But to expand on that idea and to go even further from what Jeremy was talking about, can you tell me a bit about Ternio's strategy for 2020 for user acquisition? How are you getting the word out? How do we talk to these governments? How do we look for global regulation and indicators of adoption? I mean, how can we help you here at Blockchain Versus and at CoinGenius to help more users find you, even on the enterprise Fortune 500 side? Like, how can we help you guys there?
Well, yeah, if you want to look at our website is ternio.io, but our product for Blockcard is getblockcard.com. And so we have several programs coming live. We're already live in the U.S. with Visa. We're working on a MasterCard program in Europe right now, and we have some other things happening with Union Pay and some other places around the world with MasterCard and other companies. So we're working constantly vigilant, knowing that these things take time to work on the expansion geographically of where we are. And I have no shortage of people who come to us and say, I want to run a program in this country or that country or this country. I want a white label. So for us, our user acquisition strategy is that we're focused on, we have a B2C program, which is Blockcard, and we promote it. We spend a lot of money on advertising, and we're constantly getting new users. And by expanding our geography, we get more users and more capability for users. But what we find is the more we're constantly promoting our B2C brand, we get more and more people asking about white labeling our technology. And that's ultimately where I think we're going to get our major expansion, because we don't need it to be under the, we're ultimately working with large companies, even companies who don't necessarily have any interest in cryptocurrency. It's simply taking advantage of the advantage of blockchain as a technology and transfer the value, the exchange of value that can happen seamlessly, transparently, securely. Like, there are huge advantages of using blockchain technology even if you don't ever think about anything related to Bitcoin. And so we talk to people in, like I said, somewhere like a Caribbean island. There's another country in South America where the government is interested in doing something, and it's only focused around using a digital version of their currency. No one really cares about Ethereum or Litecoin or Bitcoin. It's all about, how do I use this in terms of, solving a core problem around remittances, right? How am I going to solve that problem? And we can effectively send money, like I said, to whatever country. They get a card issued instantly on their phone. They receive the money instantly. They can spend it anywhere that card's accepted. And I think that's a major transformation for specifically for the remittance business. And things are about to change, over the next couple of years. It's going to take some time, but they're going to change pretty significantly.
Absolutely, we agree. Well, I'm very excited to, kind of track with all of that and see the mass adoption in real metrics so that we can, be that, that source of truth in the industry. I would love to use Ternio as a mass adoption use case. I think it's an absolute no-brainer that the point of sale to be able to use your crypto needs to be, empowered into the hands of the users. So I love what you're doing. You're making big headway for the industry. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So Daniel, where can people find you? I mean, where can people go? Obviously they can go to your website, but I mean, what's the best place for people to get updates in terms of, how you guys are evolving and where you guys are expanding, and news around, everything that you're doing today?
Well, I always post about it on LinkedIn, that's for sure. So you can look me up, Daniel Gouldman, Gouldman, but getblockcard.com. Sign up in 5 minutes. You can literally sign up. You can fund your account, do KYC, and you automatically have access to a card that connects directly to Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay in literally 5 minutes. And if you really want to understand why it's going to transform how we have fintech today, you just got to use it, and you see it and you're like, wow, like you can't do that anywhere else in the world with any traditional fintech. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great. Well, like I said, we're huge fans of what you're doing. Really appreciate everything and sharing your story. I think this is really powerful stuff. So hopefully, you know, our listeners really appreciate this. Let's touch base again, you know, maybe in the next 6 months or so. Would love to report on your progress. And in the meantime, you know, let's touch base offline, and we'll keep supporting each other moving forward.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Daniel.